Hi, this is George Sandman. I'm the founder and CEO of Growth Drive. Growth Drive is the #1 best-selling business advising platform, and this is our podcast, the Business Advisor Hot Seat. Now, in the hot seat, you're going to hear from industry leaders, thought leaders, your colleagues who are going to share tips, techniques, war stories about building a thriving advisory business based on delivering client wins. We're going to get into it. We'll get into it about the Growth Drive methodology, the Clarity software, what we see out in the world, so much more than just the system. And I'm also the author of The Growth Driving Advisor, which is based on over a decade of being an advisor to advisor, working with you and your colleagues, helping them build their practices, helping them through client engagements, and it's really proven strategies for leading businesses from stuck to best in class. Check it out. So strap in. We're going to light this up. Here we go. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm excited to have in the hot seat this week Bob Wegbreit. Bob and I have been friends for a very long time, and rather than Bob, me telling the world who you are and what you do, and why I'm so excited for this episode, I'll just toss it over to you. So, welcome, thank you very much, and why don't you, tell the world a little bit about yourself and why. Well, tell a little bit wow, easy for me to say, about yourself.
Yeah. And you didn't mention Philadelphia at all, George. So
there you go.
It's always important to point out that we're talking here from Philadelphia because that's an inherent thing with anybody from this region. But no, great to see you again, to talk to you again. We've, as you mentioned, we've known each other for years. And I'll give you a little background on myself and what I'm doing currently and why it's so important for your audience to know about PowerComps as I get into it, and the importance of, really, as we just started, managing seller expectations, because I got into the lower middle market private transaction world, wow, over 20 years ago at this point, about 20 years, and come off being part of a print point of sale middle market business, 60 to 100 employees, roughly $10 to $20 million a year in revenue, and family-owned business that wasn't my family, and we had an exit plan. And during that exiting strategy, for me, I decided to get out of the print point of sale world. Things were changing, evolving, both equipment, the consumer base that we had of retailers. And I ran into my friend Andy, who was an investment banker, and another partner, Graham Frazier. Were starting a database, because the challenge in the middle market, as I learned and now I'm an expert on, is when people go to sell their business or refinance or move to another generation, that they don't know what their business is worth. The only thing you hear in the market is what a public company has purchased another business for, or you hear as we like to call, country club valuation. Somebody at the country club sold a similar business, and they say, wow, yeah, we got 10, 12 times our cash flow or EBITDA for that. And that's great, but they fail to mention that they had 5, 10, 20 million of EBITDA because they were a much bigger company. And so the business owner says, wow, they got 10 or 12 times. We should be able to get 8 or 9 times. And unfortunately for them, that's not realistic. And from the investment bank advisor perspective, you don't want to disappoint somebody. You don't want the issues that happen when disappointment occurs, which is a broken deal. A lot goes into the exit process. And so if you can manage those expectations from the get-go and understand the size premium and other factors and characteristics that make a business more or less desirable within context of their industry, that's really valuable for both sides of the table, from the advisor side to get it done right, efficiently, but most important from the seller, the exit side, so that they don't get frustrated and feel they're being taken advantage of, or exit unprepared and not grow the business appropriately.
100%. It's all, that's what I'm hearing your through line there is client education, right? How do we help business owners understand, educate them about
what contributes to value, how to get a premium, and importantly, one of our favorite topics to discuss is the terms, deal terms, right?
Yeah. And we'll get to that. I mean,
Yeah,
when I exited the print point of sale, that's, um, the key man person, wasn't my business, but every single person the advisors talked to thought I owned the business. That's just the way I go about doing my business. And that business went from a certain value to a very substantially lesser value at the end of the day. And, so
yeah,
it was a shame, but it's funny. I ran into since the private equity firm that ended up buying that business, one of their holdings. And when they realized who I was in relationship, they're like, wow, you were that business. And it's like, well, and that shame on us in that business for not expanding the management team prior to the exit. But those are the type of things that owners of businesses learn the hard way, or if they have a good advisor like you or the team that works with you. And many of the investment bankers I've talked to over the years, they get that heads up. And so they have a 6 months, 6 years to accordingly.
yeah.
So, anyway, we grew that business that
So
Andy
and then you
Graham and
went
I
from
started.
Graham Fraser. That became is that GF Data?
That what you have to it didn't stand for Fraser, it stand for Greenberg and Fraser, and we grew that business from zero, so it was a complete startup. No clients, no data. Well, we had a couple data contributors that were friends of theirs. To a incredibly well respected business, we were able to exit after I think 16, 17 years at a very good valuation to an organization, ACG, that we were proud and happy to transition the business to. They have taken it and done well with it.
Yes.
And so, it's great to see your baby continue on in a good way. Um, but during that process, I went from somebody that knew the point of sale business and other aspects intimately to becoming a subject matter expert on the lower middle market and private businesses. And it was personally a wonderful growth. The data I had a good background with, but I was able to grow that. But more important, I was able to speak across the country at thought leader programs and both
Yeah.
share the knowledge we gained through our data collection, but also share the anecdotal knowledge that comes with not just having numbers, but realizing what those numbers mean in perspective. And so if you hear somebody sold a business for 10 million, $30 million, what does that really mean? I mean, how much of that was a multiple of EBITDA? What is EBITDA? As is always one of the big conversations out there. How do market conditions affect a sale today of the same industry that was sold, business in that industry that was sold 3 years ago? So all those things we'll probably touch on as we talk about what's going on in the marketplace. But having good data, because remember, these are private businesses being sold mostly to private buyers.
Yes.
So the person exiting the business doesn't want anybody to know that they got 10, 30, $50 million because it's their business and they don't want everybody
That's their
hitting on
business. Yeah.
well, that's stuff that happens when you gain wealth. I know when we sold our business, the phone calls I received, and we did okay, but we not at those levels. Um, and then at the same time, the private equity buyer doesn't want anybody to know how much they paid for future considerations and other reasons. They want to keep it so it's private to private. What we were able to do and what we're doing differently now with Tagnify PowerComps is to set up a structure where people can share information on a detailed, qualitative basis, very consistent is really the key. You know what the data represents, and be able to benchmarks that take into account all the different aspects of market, be it leverage, pricing, and availability, be it uncertainty that is accomplished through earnouts and other vehicles that we'll talk. Um, and so to have that information is just invaluable to
Totally.
start the conversation as folks exit. And you work with so many exit planners and investment bankers and wealth managers. And I assume you're hearing, well, before the conversation even gets started, what's my business worth? and there's so much to answer.
Yeah, there was so much to answer. What's my business worth and why, right? Which is something that we get into that and it distinguishes what Growth Drive does and what our software Clarity does. But that's different than a simple yet important value calculator. Bob, so you sold GF Data to ACG. I talk publicly. Actually, I had Bob Dunn on the podcast. He's become a friend, and I admire, and I'm really happy for him. He actually just got additional accountabilities within ACG, a C-suite role, and I'm excited for what he's doing and where they're going. You are now with a business called you're in the next, not the next evolution. You're in a new data collection business in this market sector. So can you describe a little bit about what you're doing now?
So all the conferences and such, you get to know the carnival, so to speak. And
100%.
One of the people I met over the years was probably the third hardest working person out there. I was the second, and another guy that doesn't know the competition was definitely the hardest working guy still out. He's great. But Chad Sanstead, and he and his partner Dave Benton had started Tagnify back in 2000, well, technically 2015, but it really came to fruition in 2017 when the SEC required public companies to add meta tags to their documents. And what they were able to do, and they continue to do in a great way, which is a little bit outside of our conversation today, but was create Tagnify, which is a competitor for PitchBook and CapIQ. And essentially, it does two things that are just terrific. Price-wise, it makes it accessible, affordable. It's and most people don't like about numbers, but the bottom line difference is it's a $5,000 a year solution compared to a $30,000 a year solution.
Yeah,
that makes it available to a lot of different people that like to have those products. But second, it's just really user and complete. So
and it really is. You've shown me how you guys do what you do, and it really is very straightforward, right? Low friction, well designed, man. And congratulations.
No, it's a terrific product. We have a ton of investment bankers, valuation firms, and other middle market folks that need that data for a variety of ways, be it easy to public deal information, economic charts, deals, who's buying who are the key buyers, 17,000 private equity groups, and what's in their portfolio, what's their investment criteria, who are their people and their contact bankers, industry reports. The valuation firms use all the bond information. So it's a really complete suite of packages. But the one thing that's missing from CapIQ and PitchBook also, is private comps, because again, they are the Mecca, the Shangri-La, the whatever you want of the middle market. To have that information, and one of the things that we're able to do at Tagnify when we developed PowerComps, and why I was willing and happy to participate in growing this, was not just get what GF Data does, which is great private equity information, very consistent, but limited, but to include the many sell-side bankers who have just the same information, but have never been asked to share it in a meaningful, consistent way. There's a few other databases out there that are okay, and people use, and they've been around for a while, but they don't really tackle that $5 to $200 million space. They tackle normally the sub $10 million space, which they might have other information, but so we were able to extend the concept to include them to get access in exchange for participation. So it's great when they call and, how much is this? And the answer is, well, share your information on an anonymous, blinded way so that you maintain most of or all of the NDA information. And it's growing quickly. We launched it about months ago. There's over 1,400 deals the past 4 or 5 years in there already, and every day somebody else seems to sign up and upload their information and continue to share it. So it's
and we're gonna recommend to our community that they do just that, or so that they do just that.
they don't have, if they're not in a position to share information, we make it available at $2,000 a year, which is, of information. That particular module is, for that price is terrific to have.
That is that's a
Um,
heck of a value. Yeah.
yeah. So, what we're collecting in the PowerComps is, I'm just going to pull my screen. You won't see it on screen, but people can reach out to me to get a full demo. It takes all of 15 or
Well, so
20 minutes.
Tagnify is the company, PowerComps is the product, right?
Yeah, there's powercomps.com or tagnify.com, but powercomps.com, they'll have a link to get to me. We capture, I'm just going to give you the quick overview of what we're capturing, the transaction date, because markets change, and also relevance. The nice thing is the data is 2022 forward for the most part. So these are post-COVID transactions, and we
Love that.
track market and industry by year, by quarter. We use NAICS codes to 6-digit granular. And then we're looking at, is it a buyout or a recap? Who's the buyer, which is really an important thing that we're going to talk about. Is it as a private company been sold to a corporate as a strategic acquisition? Has been sold to a private equity, either for strategic purposes or as a standalone financial platform? People like the business. Or did it become an ESOP? And the ESOP folks really like this, that we're able to segregate that out. Or was it just an individual buyer or a family office, which is similar to private equity, as you know, but the family office mindset tends to be, we like the business. We don't want to get too involved in it, and we want to hold it for a long period.
Buy and hold. Heck yes. Yeah. They're looking for an annuity. Yeah.
And that's,
I mean, just to vastly generalize, but yeah.
Because when you're talking exit planning, one of the first questions I'm sure your people ask is your goal to stay on, to keep your management team on, or is it to maximize value and get the heck out?
Yeah.
And if it's to stay on and continue to grow the business, that family office alternative is terrific, because they're not trying to flip. The pressure isn't there. They may not pay quite as much as a private equity that's going to flip it, but it's worth that quality of life and all the legacy that somebody has grown.
Heck yes.
We're currently taking businesses that are based in the U.S. and Canada, segregate that out, so the Canadian like that, because they have their whole debt structure creates a different market. It's similar, but to be able to look at Canadian deals versus U.S. deals, they don't get as high a multiple, but there's not the leverage factor that you see on the U.S. deals. And then it's interesting, we're asking what the role of the contributors, because we do take information from private equity, from the buy side advisors, sell side advisors, and it's internally a quality control technique to avoid any duplicates. And we have about 7 or 8 other tricks inside that we measure to avoid any risk of duplication. But it's also, as we grow this out, going to be a great thing to be able to share the perspectives that we see from both the buy side and the sell side. I know when I ran the thought leader programs that we hope to pick up again at some point, and gather 25, 30 senior deal makers in a regional market in one room, normally the law firm, and ask, what are you seeing on earnouts? Are there more earnouts, less earnouts? Are they more complicated? And at one point, I think we were in Dallas, and somebody said, oh, we never pay earnout. And that was a private equity side, because look at this as earnouts as maybe, where the sell side bankers that were in the same room said, oh no, all our earnouts get paid off, because and so it's a totally different perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting, because and here's a plug for you advisors out there. If you listen to what Bob just said, the savvy investment bankers, sell side investment bankers, will negotiate. If there's an earnout, they will negotiate an earnout that can be hit, that is reasonable. It is not a way to not pay. It is a way to ensure that the business gets to where the earnout can be earned. We currently use a 2-digit NAICS, and we're going to go to 4 digits, and that's part of the conversation we're having together. We have public data at 4 digits, but what we don't have is a lot of the context, and that's something that's important to us, and we're willing to make the investment to integrate that level of detail into analysis and recommendations. So so that's killer. Um, what else are you seeing?
So, we were talking when you talk about the difference in industries. So you could talk about two food manufacturers, and we saw this in a local acquisition that happened in the Philadelphia region, two salad companies. But you could have one that has a good for you prospect, and one that has a good quality, but more broader base, where like I think 160 unit chain of salad companies sold for less than a 30 unit because of, a lot of it was the upside, but also the good for you perspective. So even within the 6-digit NAICS, they probably would fall in the same. So it's always one of those questions that happens when you try to give somebody a benchmark and say, well, you've got, this is what we're seeing in other food franchises. We'll get that down to natural, organic foods and such. And so you never want to, with this type of data, say you are worth 6.5 times earnings based on your size in your industry.
Yeah.
But you do want to say that based on, you know, companies in your size in your industry with 20% margins, we collect margins, we collect growth rates, those type of things that as you continue to get into the quality of that business, and it might be, one of the classic ones is um, customer distribution. You have 60, we hear this all the time, a great company with all these wonderful margins, great product, good management team, but they have 60% of their revenues are coming from two clients. And, that's like an alarm bell for most private equity groups.
Agreed.
So, nobody's ever out there using this number as gospel, but they are setting the standard. And once, most people who've grown a business over the years, to spend the time and effort to work with an exit planner, to work with a investment bank advisor and such, they understand the difference between their company and their three competitors, and what differentiates them both in the product mix, but more from the business mix. So those type of things. So,
Bob, it's interesting what you just let's look at those two. If we look at those two businesses, right? Um, what you're getting at, the difference in price, right? An M&A price and an attractiveness to, let's say, private equity, to the private capital markets, is strategic capacity. And what a lot of business owners don't get, and what you and we separately are helping educate them on, is listen, the fact that you have two customers providing 60% of your revenue is not going to hurt your ability to generate predictable profits and cash flow. It is not going to harm your ability to create sustainable growth. What it is going to impact is your predictable transferable business value, because you're going to get, it's either going to be a discount or even a deal killer to show up with 60% of your rev concentrated in two accounts. And so you may have a fantastic lifestyle. We actually had a similar case here recently with a person supplying produce to a big regional swath of McDonald's. Well, that's great. Fast car in the driveway, big, beautiful house, but a business that you would have a hard time selling to someone else. It ends up being an MBO, but the concept. You said quality. We use the word strategic capacity. It absolutely applies. I'm fascinated. Fascinated. So sorry, I didn't mean to.
Yeah, no. One of the things we saw during COVID, and we still see now with all the global issues with tariffs and such, is the two factors that, and we'll kind of get back to earnouts and rollover equity.
You rollover equity, yeah.
The difference, to be quickly clear, earnouts says, if you achieve what you say you're going to achieve, you tell me, we've got this great contracts, we got this great growth ahead of us. And you're like, I'm sure you do. And if you do, we're happy to pay for it as the buyer. That's the earnout factor. The problem with earnouts is, is that revenue? Is that profit? Are all those questions of how did you get the number? Did you spend a lot or did you do it just naturally?
Well,
So
and this brings us back to the quality investment banker, because if you do it on profits, the private equity group has a vote in what in the profit number. So
you're opposing each other to
yeah.
get to that number. What everybody, that's a challenge. What everybody likes on the other side is rollover equity. And so that's
Yes.
something that's really interesting to measure. And it comes into play on two levels. So, you're going to sell that. I'm going to use, I'll use $100 million. I'm selling you my business for $100 million. But as the buyer, I want you, the seller, to keep 30% of that business. And the good news is in 3, 5, 8 years, when we sell it again, that $30 million investment that you have is going to it's going to grow to all the other good things. And that's probably going to be worth 40, 50, $80 million. From the buyer's perspective, even is more important is I know you're in it. You believe in the business
Skin
going
in the game.
forward.
Yeah.
You're signing a contract with me and you've got 30 million or 3 million, whatever the number is. So on the rollover tends to be in that 20 to 25% range, but it'll vary greatly when you do the numbers. So you got to be careful with that and really look for a median rather than a mean on it. But the being is, from the seller's perspective, you're going to get maximum value when you and want that rollover equity because you're part of the team now, and that's one of the big trust factors besides the financial factor. In fact, sometimes you hear where the seller wanted 40, 50, 60% rollover or basically a minority investment. And there's a lot of banks, a lot of private equity groups that have that as their thesis. Actually, they don't want more than 50% for a lot of different reasons. But normally the private equity push back, no, we want this investment. We want to invest 70 million. We don't want to invest 50 million, and we like it. So it's always an interesting topic, the rollover versus the earnout. But these are the type of measurements, getting back to managing expectations. And we'll get to indemnification and escrow in a second. The exit planners have to really keep in front of everybody before you start the process because that $10 million sale rarely shows up in a matter of a full $10 million check in somebody's hands. And
absolutely.
Yeah. So those are, key things to measure for two purposes. First, to know what is market. And I was always amazed that law firms would subscribe just to have that benchmark to this information because there's a couple of people measuring it, but it tends to be on much larger deals that they get that information. So on the middle market, that $5 to $200 million, it's really where there's a lot of variance, and it's important to be able to bring that out to the deal community.
Well, and we see, and Bob, we see people who are pulling data out there, service providers who are pulling data that my only because I don't think anyone is out there being dishonest, but I believe that they are including my educated guess is that they're pulling public company data into, and that sullies up the data set, right? So that is setting unrealistic expectations as to top end multiples, and it's important. What you are focused on, you have been for this part of your career, is on private capital markets, middle market, 5 million to 100 million deals, which is why we get along so well. Very important part of the market. It's half of our GDP. So yeah.
No, that's really important. And then you've got the last part, which is indemnification and basket, which is another key thing for people to understand that when the deal's done, as much diligence has been done, as much accounting has come into play, everybody's got to protect themselves. And so normally there's an indemnification where it's an agreed amount that, to X percent, and it'll vary by deal size. Proportionally, it's a little bit higher on smaller deals. There's actually more risk on a smaller deal because the financials are not normally as in good shape as, and it could be a tax issue. Most of the environmental and such are carved out as very specific, but the tax issues you hear so often of somebody that didn't realize that they were supposed to be paying sales tax in 30
you hear that all the
states.
time. Yeah.
And they just didn't have the accounting background, and nobody picked it up. It gets picked up when a transaction is announced. The state says you owe us this in sales tax and such. So those things, you need to have a barometer, a level, a benchmark, and that's what one of the reasons I collected. And then the basket is really, we don't want a nickel and dime. So what's the dollar amount? Is it 50,000, 200,000? And if that's normally proportional to deal size before we start tussling over it, because it's, you don't want to deal with that. You don't want to get that call 3 months after you sell your business that, $2,500 worth of problems have come up. It's like, well, you have to absorb that. But and then certain amounts kept in an escrow account, and that you expect. So you have,
and you're tracking all of that, right?
We're picking that up, we're tracking it, and that's really so important when you start to sell your business. And it's always interesting what comes into play. I was just out to dinner with a friend who owns a engineering architecture firm, and they went through an ESOP at the same time they went through a divorce. And the dynamics of an ESOP transaction are basically to make your business work, which is possible because you have an investor coming in. And the dynamics of a divorce transaction, unfortunately, are the opposite, where you want to say, well, not really sure how much, it's not worth as much as we think it is. So they had two different dynamics. And so it's interesting when you talk about what's a valuation, what's the purpose of the valuation that comes into play.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
Bob, man, you just hit on one of my favorite topics, because so many business owners like, well, I had a valuation done, but they do not yet appreciate, to be kind, they do not yet appreciate, and we need to correct their appreciation, their understanding of reality, is they had the valuation done for a divorce, and they're arguing that the company's worth nothing. Or they had the valuation done for life insurance. The purpose of a valuation is critical. And hey, now, you are gathering this data, and you will provide it on a commercial basis to the market, which I think is fantastic. You're also, can you touch on the industry reports that Tagnify is generating as well? Is that under the PowerComps brand, or is that
so that's under the Tagnify brand, but it's so there's several users on the Tagnify basis, but the evaluation firms will provide evaluation, and we'll stick with architecture, engineering, those services. Tagnify has over 800 different industry reports. There's an IBIS, and they all kind of serve the same purpose of both, for evaluation, 20% education, 80% making sure everybody understands the industry, who the big acquirers, what are the industry terminology, what's going on legally in the industry, what type of regulation and such. And so you need to include that, because anybody that's involved in the deal has to really make sure they're fully educated on their industry. So they're But it's a nice thing that we at Tagnify are able to provide amidst all the other Tagnify data of who's doing what deals, what public companies are in this space, who's looking for, which investment bankers have served this industry, and what, most important, what private equity groups have bought in their portfolio.
Yeah.
Similar business, because they're the most likely to buy another one, either as a strategic add-on or just knowing and understanding the industry and being willing to invest. When you look at the investment criteria, which we also reconnect, and who has put that they're looking for, home manufacturers and such in their investment criteria. And it's nice to be able to get that cleanly, both from the advisor perspective, but even from the end user, like what's the market out there? How many people have bought pest control businesses in this space.
So that right there, the confidence of data, right? So when you're going out 6 NAICS digits, industry sector, and then that's drilling down to that's going as far as you can go, right? Do you share with subscribers the number of deals that are in that sector?
Again, we're overlapping into Tagnify and Power. So on PowerComps, yes, we say there were 58 deals in machinery manufacturing that we have in our database. Now, again, our database is going to probably be, even when we get to say fruition, but right now we have roughly 1,400 deals. We anticipate in the next year or so to get up to 3,000 deals, and roughly 300 to 500 deals a year, which is great statistically. What percentage of all deals is that? Probably will be 10 to 30% of all deals, depending on the industry. Some industries are more participatory than other industries and such. On the Tagnify side, we're capturing 85-90%, very much like PitchBook and Cap IQ, when of all deals. And so that's the other aspect of what people need to understand. What's your potential market, and when who it wants businesses, be it public, private, and such, and then listing those deals for your person to say, wow. And invariably, some of these, and you're always surprised. Wow, well, if they bought them, then that was a good business. I knew the owners. Let's look. Maybe we should be reaching out to them as a potential target. And that's what the advisor is going to end up doing. But to have that easily available, in a 2 or 3 click to a download to Excel, it saves hours. Everybody thinks that they can do it with AI. And there's a certain level of AI captures, but you do a search on one of our platforms, doing a good quality Claude or Chat or whatever you're using. It doesn't quite get there, but
it doesn't quite get there. I can vouch for that. It doesn't quite get there.
We have proprietary techniques to capture who's buying who, and we have like 8,000 private equity groups that we have trackers on their website. So they make an internally on their website that alerts us, and we add that to either news or deal announcements and such. And
what you're doing is you're verifying. What I love, it's the quality of the data. This all goes to quality of data, which is we live and die by the quality of the analyses, of the calculations we deliver, and that's why I love. That's why you and I have been talking for so long. It's high quality, highly reliable data. It's not absolutely predictive, but it's reliable, and something that you advisors should be considering. And I'll state the obvious. If your client says, I want to sell the business in 5 years, let's say, you have the opportunity to identify potential buyers, right, in a very sophisticated way, using Tagnify, PowerComps, et cetera, and to start designing the business so that it will be attractive. We can't predict where the market will be in 5 years, but you can start making some educated guesses about how the business will need to look to be highly likely to successfully complete an M&A transaction at target multiple, and identifying the buyers. And often what the data shows us is that, that it may not be, you may be surprised who is acquiring businesses like your clients and who might be willing to pay a premium for businesses like that owned by your client. So, and that's all in your data. What can
it's
be
always
extracted
surprising
from your data?
Just out of being in this industry, every day I pop up our deals, and deals are updated daily. And I'm always surprised when I see certain companies have acquired a company, or if the businesses, since I know the business community so well, especially in my Philadelphia regional market, I see something sold. Just saw a friend of mine sold a toy industry business that he built from scratch, and I was I had no idea that the group he bought. And then I looked at their background and what private equity group they were at. So just and those folks I knew from being in this industry, and I just kind of
Yeah.
chuckled at
It's
how
so
that
funny. You
world
know what you
works.
say about Philadelphia? I lived in Philly for almost 4 years, and you're spot on. And it's an enclave. And
So we always joke in Philadelphia. You never say I would never say, "Oh, I spoke to George Sand." I'd say I spoke to George. But if you say that name, two names out loud in a public place, somebody will say, "Oh, I know George." Then they'll
yeah, that's 100%. That's 100%. And coming in so my friends and I called ourselves expats because it's a tight community.
yeah.
Hey, Bob, what haven't it's hard to believe we've been chatting for about 40 minutes. What haven't we covered?
I think we've got a pretty good concept to people, both the Tagnify and the PowerComps play. I think I need to reiterate that if you need to reach me, you can go to tagnify.com or probably powercomps.com. And we have a contact sign up, which takes all of 15 minutes. And you can tell I'm not a pushy person. Um, again, we are collecting information from buy-side advisors, private equity, and investment bankers, those who have been part of the process of they're only completed transactions. And the way the data is collected, we never expose individual deals, names of deals,
No, of course.
or who contributed them in any way. So it's, I like to say safe, but more important, it fits all the parameters that you've signed off on. And it's good quality. It's excellent
Yes.
benchmark
Yeah, the
meant
data is
to
really sexy.
manage
Yeah.
expectations and understand what is. We're starting to add quarterly reports because the one thing we didn't really talk about is market changes. What is the difference today versus a year ago today versus 4 years ago today? And I saw in the printing industry that I was in, there was a time where you couldn't sell a printing business for hardly anything because um, industry had changed so rapidly with the advent of digital printing
Yes.
and such. And so the industry cleared itself out, but there was no private equity groups buying it. Now, since it cleared itself out, it has a foundation of what people are looking for in that space. And it's, again, there's a good M&A market for printing businesses, and they've found their niche. They're not, on the decline. They're holding steady,
Yes,
growing
they are now. Yeah.
in areas that they're needed, be it catalogs or such. So, looking at things on a year-to-year, quarter-to-quarter basis, so much of the private equity world is driven by debt pricing and debt availability, which we are collecting. Um, and what you see right now in the market is a reduction of the private equity groups buying businesses versus 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when debt was cheap and available. Um, and so deals, the difference of being able to get 50 or 60% of the deal in debt at 6 or 7% pricing for senior debt versus currently when people are only backing 30 or 40% of the deal with debt at 9 to 11%. That's a big difference in the equation.
I'm super grateful that you're bringing that up. In our analysis, we have 24 growth driving objectives, but there's a 25th bonus. And those who use the system knows that the 25th bonus question is, we're asking the CEO, have you considered how market conditions impact the value of your business? And you've just underscored how important it is to understand market conditions, not just the stock market and the economy generally, although these are all related. Man, thank you very much for bringing that up. It allows
Well, it's
me to
interesting. People
grow a
say,
bit
should I
better.
try to time the market?
Yeah,
And the answer is not really, because the time of the market is when you're ready, is being prepared for when you're ready to time yourself to
yeah,
move on with your life or to take on a new partner, whatever it is. To try to time them, you just have to understand the market, that it is going to change. It may change for the better or worse, and is well
100%.
They have these witch doctors out there called economists. And one of the nice things I got to speak with on the couple of the conferences I got to speak at have been with very well-known international or nationally known economists. And
Did you tell me you were at one with the Bollios, one of the Bollia brothers?
yes,
Yeah.
And that was actually a good personal influence. They had a statement about real estate that influenced me buying a second property, a lake property. That's been just, a great thing for me, both primarily life-wise, but also financially. And they made a comment that I took to heart speaking. But to get back to trying to time the market is, almost every advisor will tell you can't time the market. You don't know what the market's going to be. So you can try it.
That's a fact. But what we can know is that, that our bull and bear markets follow a rough, decade cycle roughly. And if you're planning to exit in a bear market, feel free, yes, that's when you're ready, but you need to be ready to understand how those market conditions are going to impact what the quality of your business needs to be, and the types of terms, et cetera, and that they can get from your data. And yeah, so cool. Bob, listen, man, I have a feeling we need to come back and have a second follow-on conversation. And I'm really psyched for you, for everything you guys are doing. High quality scrubbed data is so incredibly valuable. And I'm a shameless plug, people. We more to come, but between Bob and I, more to come. Bob, I'll put your contact information. I'll ask Catherine to include your contact information. So all you listeners, it's here in the podcast, and you can go to powercomps.com, track down Bob Wegbreit. And if you can't find him, hit us up. But we're happy to make the connection. So Bob, thank you very much. And we'll talk soon, man.
Great. Thank you. Take care.